Lords, this has been a really important debate because it's emphasised and demonstrated the muddle that is in this bill, the vacuum that will be created following the local government reorganisation process. How is it, my Lords, that Clause 60 can't even bring itself to mention the towns and parish councils that have formed the bedrock of our society? I know it's inconvenient to have, those pesky politicians, interfering in that sort of administrative confidence. Why do we want delegates and deputies, at that lowest level? I can understand why the dead hand of Marsham Street has written Clause 60 as they have, but it's not good enough, because what it doesn't do is have that golden thread of legitimacy that can only come with election or democratic accountability. What we are seeing here isn't authoritative governance, it's authoritarian governance, because we're going to lead it to local authorities to impose relationships in sub-parts of their territory without any regard or requirement to have democratic legitimacy in those smaller parts of their territory. We've had an interesting discussion about, and the number was bandied around, 20% of places around Parish, and it isn't equally spread throughout the nation. But by and large, the old county boroughs, the historic county boroughs, are the ones that haven't been parished because they've been billing authorities in their own right. They've been the district. But there are parts of areas like King's Lynn, for example. King's Lynn is currently going through a consultation, a proud Hanseatic town, to form its own parish, so there isn't a vacuum. Now, but the point is, and I'm very attracted to the amendments 207, 210, and especially 209A in the name of the Earl of Lytton, because it's going to prevent vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. But unless we have these absolute requirements here, there will be a vacuum. Now, I know we've had a discussion about parishes, and I think there was some confusion over what you might call ecclesiastical parishes, sort of those parts of a town with a sort of parish church, but haven't really got constituted parishes, incorporated parishes that are part of a parish council. And I think it is important that the nomenclature that we use is straightened out. So I'm going to think about civil parishes as opposed to ecclesiastical ones. And of course there are already a multiple set of arrangements. In my own electoral ward, the two parishes of Alpington and Yelverton, inconveniently at both ends of the alphabet, but they have come together to form a community council, you might say. It's a joint parish council with warding when it comes to the periodic elections. So there must be a minimum number of councillors from Alpington and a minimum number of councillors from Yelverton coming together as part of that parish council. There are about 400 or 500 people who live in those two parishes put together. But where is the equivalence between Alpington and Yelverton working together and Weston-super-Mare? And we are trying to shoehorn. And this bill should be clear. Now, earlier, on a previous session, on Monday, I believe it was, I was ploughing a lonely furrow as I tried to give some sort of size distinction. So between these smaller parishes and the larger towns. And I was on my own, but I feel that had that debate been held today, I might have got more support. Nevertheless, we have to make sure that we end up with properly constituted, incorporated bodies to govern these small bits. And just establishing a joint committee or a subcommittee of the supervisory, if I might, or the new body that sits above it, isn't going to be any good for exactly the library point that was made so well. This bill is deficient because none of this texture is explained or or laid out. There's just a muddle that we're sort of with no legitimacy. This must be brought back at report with significantly more flesh on the bones, and I would certainly encourage the noble Baroness, the Minister, who I'm not sure whether even Stevenage is parished. It was certainly a new town, and there's a whole new class of authority there which we may need to look at in this regard. But we've got to try and bring together all those bits from my noble friend Lord Lansley, the Earl of Lytton and others, to try and bring some order to this, because otherwise it'll be disorderly.
I apologise for intervening again. It isn't just legitimacy, it is also that occasionally local areas want to pay for local amenities which the large unitary doesn't want to. Shipley, in which Saltaire is based, now has a town council because Bradford decided it couldn't afford to pay for public toilets. Ilkley had its own town council, so it could do it. The other tourist destination, Haworth, has a Bronte Museum which pays for its own toilets. Saltaire is a World Heritage Site which had no money to pay for its toilets, so we had to form a Shipley Town Council in order to reopen an absolutely essential part of our local community and economic area. That's a new tension that we have to have for libraries as well, and plenty of others. We need to have some degree of fundraising power for local activities.
And I didn't want to come back, but I will, to amplify your point. I think I can call you my noble friend in this regard. The incorporation point is really important, because elsewhere in this bill there are provisions for CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, to be passed down to neighbourhood areas or whatever. These bodies need to have a bank account, they need to have governance, they need to have representation, they must have legitimacy. And this bill is silent on it, and it's deficient in that regard. We've got to move forward, otherwise we're just going to end up in a muddle.
Discussion we have had about this group of amendments, and Lord Fuller has rightly called this clause a muddle, and has rightly said we need to come back to this at report stage with some flesh on the clause.